Hello and welcome to another video from the only channel you need to not only survive current apocalypse, but actually enjoy it. And today we're going to take a look and see whether or not I was successful at fixing the water problem in my tent. It's supposed to rain for 7 days straight, but today when I checked the weather, it showed only a 20% chance of rain today, so I figured this would be a good time to make a video. Can't very well bring my camera out in the rain. The creek is really full. Call it a creek. I think it's traditionally supposed to be called a brook, but every time I read about a brook, it's not in the deep south. Usually in the deep south we call everything a creek, whether it's proper or not. I have another trail that is a little bit drier, but initially right after a bad storm, neither one of them are drier enough to make it worth any extra distance, so I just go the short way. I also wanted you to see how close my tent is to the house right now. There's a lot of why I don't sleep out here some nights. It's not so much the conditions in the tent, it's conditions getting to the tent. There's my house that we just left, and you can see through the woods there my tent is only about 250 feet from my house. I still have that little tent set up too. We'll check it out today, see how it's faring. I thought I'd be sleeping out here in the big tent half the time and the little tent half the time, but it's just so nice in this big tent. And this wasn't supposed to be an exercise in suffering, just exercise in tent living. Okay, I want to open all the windows in this tent, which means unzipping all the flaps over the screens. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and lubricate those zippers. They say that it's a bad idea to do that, but these zippers are really stiff. A couple of them in some places are so stiff that when I'm pulling on them, I always am afraid I'm going to derail the zipper or tear the tent. So I've got a couple of items here. One is just some vegetable oil. I don't think you should use any kind of petroleum products on a tent because it's synthetic, and anytime you see the word synthetic, what that means is petroleum. And sometimes liquid petroleum will act as a dissolver, a solvent for solid petroleum. And as an experiment, you can take and put gas in a styrofoam cup if you've ever done that, and the styrofoam cup just disappears. But anyways, we're going to use this on a couple of places. This is a wax bowl ring. It's basically chapstick, but it's designed to put under your toilet, so when you flush your toilet there's no water leaks out around the base of your toilet. And they're cheap. The only reason I keep this is for grafting. A grafting kit for tree grafting is like $60 at the nursery, and it's basically just some tape and some wax. So you buy your own wax and you buy some package tape that has that string running through it, and you get a $60 grafting kit for $3, maybe $5. Well, anyway, we're going to put a little bit of this on half of my flaps, and we're going to put a little vegetable oil on the other half. We may leave a couple of them undone in order to come back later with a candle, because I've done that before. You take a candle and rub it on something for lubricant, and the candle is basically this, but a little bit more solid. I think the places where I've used candles before don't collect dust. I suspect that this will collect dust, but we're just going to put a very, very small amount on, so it probably ain't going to make a difference. You open this thing up, it's like in a cup, so it's easy to put back away. And I suspect it's the same thing as chapstick, but I've got chapsticks all over the place, so I don't need to use a toilet ring for chapstick. We're not really coating the whole thing, because when you pull the zipper along, it's going to get on the zipper and everything will get coated. But we'll get a little bit spread around at a few spots. Basically, you coat it about as thick as you would coat your lips. Ugh. It's a good idea if you're living in a tent to keep a roll of paper towels and a roll of toilet paper with you. Still not real comfortable with these zippers. All done with that one. On this side, we'll put a little oil, vegetable oil. all done with that one. If I was just staying in this tent like one weekend a year, I wouldn't go through all this trouble. I just try to be careful with how I zipped them and unzipped them. But since I'm unzipping these things like every single day and plan on living in here for life, kind of motivated to go the extra mile, I guess. Alright, everything in here is dry. Now, a few days ago, when I made that last video about the tent being dried up and I put all my blankets and sheets back in, well, I unzipped all the windows and I went in the house and I fell asleep, took a nap. And it was a long one, like 2 hours, and I knew it was supposed to rain that day. When I woke up, I thought for sure that rain may have gotten into my tent, so I ran out here, and no, it hadn't. And I zipped everything up and went back in. Well, that night it started pouring down. It poured down all night. And I realized that even though I had zipped up all of my flaps, I didn't take things away from the side, because in a tent, if it's pouring down rain, you can stay bone dry inside your tent. But anything touching the wall will get wet, because even though water has a tendency to run down the outside of the tent, if you touch it, then the rain will just soak through and get on whatever's touching it. So the next day I knew I was going to have a mess. I came out here and I took and felt around everything that was touching the wall, especially all those pillows. Let's see. Yeah, you see all the pillows I got over here? They're all against the wall. And I just knew they're underneath that blanket. I just knew that they'd be soaked. And they weren't. They were bone dry. However, this one Coleman sleeping bag box had a little puddle of water on top of it where it had been touching against the wall. If you notice, they have these flaps, pockets built in, and the pockets have a mesh so you can see them, but they also hang loose from the tent so that they're not touching. So anything you put in there will stay dry. I've got a weather radio in this pocket, and I have a few books in the one on the other side. This tent also has a ventilation duct built into the roof. I'll show you that. And I was real sure to open those up whenever I set the tent up. But when I came back in here, it was still no airflow, and I reached up in there, and that's when I realized if you use a rain fly on top of a tent that has a vented roof, then the vented roof thing doesn't work. But that's a good area to put stuff in, because those little pockets are mesh, and as long as you've got stuff in there that's not touching the top of the tent where the rain fly is touching, I guess it'd be okay. Or if you had something that wasn't affected by water, like plastic fork and spoon or something. But taking that ground sheet out from underneath the tent really did solve my problem. I have run my hands all the way along the walls, underneath my rug, underneath my blankets, and all the low spots that were collecting water before, I've reached down in there and everything's really, really dry. So last night was wonderful out here. It rained all night and I was as comfortable as I could be, and I actually enjoyed listening to the rain hit the roof of the tent. Oh well, that's it. Living in a tent. If you don't want to survive, don't listen to me.